Powers That Be, sponsored by Alex R. White, personal injury lawyers you can trust.
Welcome into the Powers That Be. I'm Isaiah Kim-Martinez, and today we are focusing, guys, all about data centers and the implications with them.
That's right. I'm Doug Proffitt. We have Travis Breese, our focus team investigator here at WHAS 11.
We appreciate you taking the time.
Of course, I know a lot about the topic.
Part of our team of reporters seems to be covering data centers and these public hearings that are happening. The one in Carrollton, Kentucky, let's talk about that since it's in our metro area. You were the only reporter there, and the developers from Louisville showed up. Mm-hmm. They've been hard to get a hold of. Mm-hmm. High-profile company called Poe. What was that like? Did they give details that residents really needed to hear?
So Poe Companies and Powerhouse Data Centers. Poe Companies is Louisville-based company. Powerhouse Data Centers is a Virginia-based company. I don't know how they got linked up, but they are a tandem that is pursuing two hyperscale data centers in our area. The one that is underway, construction has started in Rubbertown in West Louisville. And then this other one that really I've been focusing on over the last month and a half really is this one in Carrollton, which is probably going to be bigger, which is probably going to require more megawatts of electricity. I guess we want to talk about the map a little bit first.
Yeah, you have the map right next to you. Pull it up full, Travis. So essentially our team at WHAS 11 has been sort of tracking approved projects, planned projects, and rejected projects. And it seems like we have about 8 on the page here if you want to kind of break it down.
Yeah, so probably the two that people are probably most familiar with is the Meta data center in Jeffersonville, Indiana. Mm-hmm. And there's a small one in yellow in Charlestown, Indiana, that's only 3 megawatts. But those two in Clark County are the only ones where we know what company is going to go in there. Wow. Every other one on that map is just being constructed, and then the developers are saying, we're going to build it first, and then we're going to find a company. So out of all those ones on the map, we only know the 2 in Clark County that have an announced end user. So
that gives people pause, right? Not knowing all the details.
Well, in Carrollton, they say they felt they were surprised by this project.
Yes, I think people want to know who is the secret, who are you building this for? The developers would tell you that that's just how this works. We have to build it first. We're not going to have some company come in and say, we want to move in there when it's just a vacant lot. They say that this is how it works. You have to let us build it first, and then we find a company. The people want that answer sooner. And then, Doug, you said that the people in Carrollton say they were surprised by this project. Yes, and I've actually just got a open records request back from the city of Carrollton that's on my desk right now that says that there is a contract with the city that's dated November 2025, and it references another contract from July 2025. So we know that the Carrollton project had at least been in the works for a little over a year.
And when did residents say they first kind of start to get word of it?
Well, just recently this summer, those public hearings
we got the press release. We started publishing it. I think it was in late July. So
we're talking about maybe a year between some of the early records.
At least a year.
And they said that their government officials weren't telling them anything.
Yes, and that's what's been so tricky about this, and that this is a good segue into the package I did yesterday, is that this data center is not within the city limits of Carrollton, but the city of Carrollton is a player because it owned the majority of the land. And so people have really pointed the finger a lot at Carrollton Mayor Rob Adams for not being transparent enough with this. And yes, like you said, Doug, Tuesday at 9 a.m., there was an open meeting in Carrollton, in Carroll County Fiscal Court about the project, and I was the only reporter of any outlet there, if we can play
Here's that story.
Residents gathered Tuesday morning at Carroll County Fiscal Court to hear developers speak about a hyperscale data center between I-71 and the Kentucky River. The developers have had 2 community meetings in the month of August, but both have been restricted to Carroll County residents only. So on Tuesday was our first time to get access to one of these presentations. Poe Company's president Hank Hillebrand said the center would need between 2 and 8 million gallons of water every year.
That is, about the size of a couple of quick serve restaurants. That is not a massive water user.
He said that would be nowhere near the largest water user in the county. He also said they are exploring using reclaimed water and zero water that would go to people's homes. While the land for development is outside the city of Carrollton, the city owned the majority of the land because it's next to the water treatment plant. The city negotiated a $10 million annual fee as part of the land purchase. The city is getting more money than the county under the proposal. This angered Sheriff Ryan Gosser.
The city has zero responsibility out there, yet they're receiving $4 million more than what the county's going to.
Carrollton Mayor Rob Adams did not respond to a request for comment.
It's not been transparent through the city.
Mike Wood and his twin brother own 60 acres just west of the project site. They think the center will be too loud.
I did a decibel test on our farm. It was 54.4 decibels. The company says they won't go above 65.5. That's a continuous hum 24 hours a day.
The center would need as much electricity as 600,000 average homes. I asked Hillebrand about plans to energize it.
Are you going to submit an initial energy plan to the Kentucky Department of Environment and Energy as required by the governor's executive order?
We're going to go through the processes that are required of us by all state and local regulation.
My brother and I, we're not going anywhere. I'm going to fight them any way I can.
While members of the fiscal court said they got their questions answered, Wood said it was his third time seeing the same presentation.
Well, this story really gets to the nitty-gritty that's below the surface. I mean, you've got sort of a revenue battle that developed in your piece. What a range on water from 2 to 8 million gallons. I did look it up, though. A quick-serve restaurant, on average, does do 2 million a year. Why is the city of Carrollton getting more money than the county of Carroll County?
When asked that question yesterday, Mr. Hillebrand just said it was a stipulation that the city put into our land purchase agreement. And I asked Mayor Adams if he had any comments on why that was, and he didn't get back to me. But it seems like it's because that I think the city had been eyeing this project for some time. The city owned all that land, most of it, and the city owned the land around the water treatment plant and said, this is perfect. They said, this is some underused land. The city has called it like a crawfish area. Like they're saying that it's not very good for farming, that it's like an unusable, unfarmable area. And yeah, the city was the majority landowner, even though it's outside of the city limits. So they negotiated a $10 million plus annual pilot, what they're calling it, payment in lieu of taxes. So I don't know exactly how much they would have gotten in
Similar
taxes.
to what Churchill Downs has set up with Jefferson County Public Schools. They do have an agreement where they basically pay that, give them $1 million a year.
Right. Very controversial. Not paying taxes.
So the sheriff spoke out in that story. He said, why is the city, so the city's getting $11 million per year and the county's getting $7 million. And, you know, the county getting $7 million, that's still a pretty impressive increase. That's not nothing.
Yeah.
And that's probably enough to cover increased patrols out there.
Yeah.
But the sheriff was saying, why does the city get more when it's my department that has to, if you have any issues out there, that I'm responsible?
Travis, I wanted to ask about generation, right? Because that comes down to sort of the biggest part of this issue, you know, put environmental issues, which are big too, to the side for a second. And that is folks afraid what it's going to do to their utility bills. You've had conversations with our main utility service, LG&E, about essentially the generation that they're going to be or planning for in the future and how much of it may or may not go to data centers. Talk to us about that.
So at power plants, there are generators. So like at Mill Creek Generating Station in Valley Station, there's like 5 generators, and they're in the process of replacing some of the coal units with natural gas combined cycle, which has lower emissions than coal. And the industry likes natural gas combined cycle units. So, and LG&E and KU are building 645 megawatt NGCCs. So Mill Creek 5 will come online next year, 645 megawatts. And then there are 2 more NGCCs that the utility is building that should be done by 2031. So that in total is almost 2 gigawatts of generation. That's 1,900 megawatts of new generation. And I've spoken...
Huge. Yeah.
Yes, it is. I believe Mill Creek Generating Station is maybe something like 1,300 megawatts. So it's about 1.5 times Mill Creek Generating Station. And I've spoke to LG&E about this a lot over the last year, and they say that when we requested, and all those generators were approved by the Kentucky Public Service Commission. It took months of LG&E laying out, this is why we need them, these are the projects we have in the pipeline. And LG&E told me for over a year, said, this is for all of our customers. This is for people, this is for Toyota, this is for GE, and yes, it's also for data centers. But if we look at the data center load that's coming online, the Rubbertown data center is going to be 525 megawatts. The Carrollton data center is going to be 800 megawatts. So those two together is 1,300 megawatts. So that is 68% of all those three new generators. And so I brought that up to LG&E and head spokesperson Liz Pratt yesterday, and she told me that, again, we have a responsibility to serve all customers. We have forecasted this. This is a part of our plan. We're not shocked by any of this. And we put these projects have been in our pipeline, and we've been planning for them. She said that we have many protections in place to make sure that these data centers are helpful to the everyday person because they're going to be paying for those new generators. Those generators, all three of them together, are about $4 billion. And so they kind of need the data centers to come in to help pay for it because they will pay a new tariff that LG&E and KU negotiated.
High load tariff.
Yeah, so...
Well, let's talk about the restrictions. The moratoriums are so that these governments and different entities can work out how they want to regulate data centers. Are you seeing any of these regulations that stand out over other towns, or are they all starting to look the same to you as far as how they're going to regulate these businesses in the future?
Well, I just think it's interesting that the months can kind of fly by.
Yeah.
Like, I remember we all thought, like, oh, Oldham County's off the table because Oldham County has a moratorium. Well, I think their moratorium's expiring
Yes,
now.
it
Yeah.
is.
Louisville's is only 6 months. I mean,
Right.
by
One of the
Christmas
shortest.
time, we're already going to be doing this again.
And so I've heard some people float out in public meetings like, if we pass a full-on moratorium, we could be sued. Maybe these tech companies could sue us and say you're unfairly targeting our business as opposed to others. But yeah, you can have a full-on moratorium like what counties like, I believe, Oldham and Nelson.
I think Allison just told us in our ear that Oldham just extended theirs.
Okay.
Recently. Yeah.
So you can have a full-on moratorium that says no new data centers, or you can do what Louisville's trying to do, which is allow data centers, but put guardrails on the ones that you do allow so that you don't have any more hyperscale data centers. You don't have any that, and you put guardrails on how far away they need to be from homes. You put guardrails on where they can be in the community. So yeah, we've seen full out bans.
And how much consumers would pay?
I mean, they put that in there, but like, the Louisville Planning Commission can put in a document saying we require the utilities to put in writing that they will not affect the consumers. But I mean, the Planning Commission is not the venue to put those things in writing. That would be with the Kentucky Public Service Commission because they're the ones who regulate the utilities, not the Planning Commission. So yes, they do put those in writing. Even the governor put it in his executive order, said you have to show us that that you're not going to raise people's rates. But I mean, we're a ways away from proving that to be true.
And Travis, you spoke to an expert in Chicago about, one, are we going to need all this, right, when it comes to AI in the decades to come? And I really liked his answer here. We're actually going to try to run both of these interview sections together here as sort of his perspective, this expert, on sort of the future of AI and whether we need all this data center infrastructure.
What happens if we don't build data centers? Will YouTube start buffering? Will my Gmail storage get full?
Well, I suppose there's a business answer, and there's also a technological answer. I think the business answer that the companies who want to build all these data centers would tell you is, their businesses will stop growing. The American economy will not progress. They talk about leadership and competition of various types will fall behind, whatever definition of that you want to use. If you ask what will happen, I think actually what you'd find is that less AI will get deployed. Applications won't be as fancy and capable and impressive as quickly. The data centers are still a small portion of the overall electricity consumption, right? And the Lawrence Berkeley lab that does some of the best studies just did this updated report where they said by 2030, the range of U.S. power that they're projecting is 9 to 15%. And they're kind of estimating it'll wind up in the middle, maybe around 11 or 12%, right? So that's even 5 years out, it might be, not, 11 or 12%. So it's still not the majority of what's going on. I think, it is true that we may be growing towards a much larger number. It wouldn't surprise me personally, right? If you ask me what my estimate was, by 2040, we could see a much larger percentage, right? It could be, I've said publicly in other venues, as high as 50%.
Big number.
So yeah, that's Dr. Andrew Chen, who's a computer science professor at the University of Chicago. And yeah, because we hear the tech companies say, and LG&E said this too in a recent press release. They said, we need data centers to, if you want to call your mom on FaceTime, if you want to upload a photo, we need data centers. They said that in a recent handout that they were handing out at the State Fair. And I wanted to ask Andrew Chen, is that really true that we really need data centers every time we want to use the internet? And he said, increasingly, I think it is true, because the tech companies are integrating AI into so many of the tools that we use every day. When you go on Zoom, it'll say, Zoom AI assistant is with you on this call. You now have an option when you're making a new contact for someone on your phone that you can describe what the person looks like, and Apple AI will draw you a picture of what they look like. So yes, those options are there for us every time we use this technology. And Dr. Chen said in his second soundbite, he said some national projections say that data centers will make up 11 to 12% of the entire U.S. power grid in 5 years. And he thinks in 15 years, it could be as high as 50% of the entire U.S. power grid goes to data centers. And he acknowledged, he said, that's a hypothetical guess by me. It probably won't get that high. But he said, we just need to decide as a society. Our legislators need to decide, and we need to tell them, are we okay with that number as people? Are we okay with that much of the grid going to these tech improvements? Are these tech improvements worth it? Is that what we want our society to represent?
Well,
Pretty existential question there.
They may be controversial, but the developers are not. They're not shying away from them. We may not be seeing the developers as much as we would hope, but they are jumping in despite the immense controversies in these communities. And these meetings have been hugely attended in many spots.
I mean, I don't know where the Trump administration stops and starts its, communication, but Donald Trump has ads saying Donald Trump wants to build data centers in your community. Data centers are good for your community. So there's a heavy push from the White House to build data centers. And I mean, I don't know how much of it is filtering down to our local political level, but there is a large section of the industry right now that feels that we don't want to fall behind China. AI is the future, and we need to make sure that we have the best AI possible. And so, yeah, they are plowing full steam ahead, and a lot of people think they're going too fast.
Travis Breese, investigative reporter, thank you so much for breaking this down for us. I'm sure we'll be talking about this a lot more here in the days, weeks, and months to come.
A lot more public meetings you'll be at.
Yes, sir.
After the break, we'll be talking to a prominent Kentucky lawmaker about his data center regulation bill that fizzled out here earlier this year, but he's going to come back again next year with something very similar. We're going to talk to him, but first we want to show you on your screen here. This is how you can weigh in on the issues that matter to you the most ahead of the November 3rd election. Go ahead and scan this QR code on your phone, and you can answer a quick 10-question survey. Let us know exactly what kind of questions you'd like us to ask in our coverage ahead of the midterm elections. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Sue, distracted driver.
Attorney Alex White. If you're injured, visit SueDistractedDriver.com.
Welcome back to the Powers That Be. We are joined now by Representative Josh Bray of Mount Vernon, Kentucky. Representative Bray, thank you so much for taking a few minutes to talk about data centers today.
Yeah, thank you all for having me.
Josh, a lot of cities in Kentucky are putting on moratoriums. I think one of the longest I've seen is London, Kentucky at 2 years. A moratorium's different from a ban. I haven't seen any cities banning data centers outright. With your effort underway in Frankfurt, do you think data centers should be banned, or are they just an eventuality for the state of Kentucky because of our pretty cheap resources here?
Yeah, I mean, I think that just looking at the just planning out the future, looking at the advancements made in artificial intelligence, data centers are unfortunately something that goes hand in hand with that. I think when you look at the habits of consumers all across the country, streaming Netflix, all the time on social media, videos, TikTok, YouTube, data centers are, they're required for all of that. Looking at these moratoriums, I think they make sense as we grapple with, kind of this new technology and the reality of it. It makes sense that people are concerned about energy prices, utility usage, land use concerns. So to press pause and let the legislature kind of come in and pass some good guardrails makes sense to me, especially if you're concerned.
And Representative, I'm glad you brought that up, because guardrails and parameters, those are the two words that Senate President Robert Stivers used in an interview earlier this week, talking about data center legislation, regulations going into 2027. He talked about how he's working with you on this to sort of get that really fine-tuned. We know your data center regulation bill just missed that, crossing that finish line earlier this year. It actually did not pass the Senate. What changes are being made at this point? What can we expect for next year in that version?
Yeah, so listen, I mean, the House, I feel like we did our job. House Bill 593, it was a good, thoughtful piece of legislation. It made sure that people's energy bills wouldn't go up. It made sure that your water bill's not going to go up. It made sure that data centers are going to have to pay their own way. It had some of the most robust protections in the country in there. It required that if a data center is going to come in, they have to prepay for any kind of cost they impose on the transmission, on the system, either through transmission or generation. And because, the tech companies are having to pay for that up front, ratepayers are held harmless. There's no risk there. Because they're having to pay all of that, if the bubble pops or if chips become more efficient and there are stranded assets in these utility systems that are already paid for. So ratepayers aren't going to be on the hook for that. Those are, in my mind, common sense practices that protect ratepayers. So what the House passed, it was a good, solid, fleshed out piece of legislation. It had some of the most robust protections in place. And I don't see us really backtracking on that. I think that some of the concerns are valid when you look at, kind of what's happened in some other states. We've got to make sure that if data centers are coming to Kentucky, that Kentuckians aren't going to be exposed to any kind of risk through utilities or noise or whatever their concerns are.
Where should a data center not go, in your opinion? I mean, are there specific places where you think they should be built? You told us before we recorded that this is the most complicated issue you've had to deal with. That is that because of the public protests, or is it just everything? But where should a data center not be built in any community in your mind? And typically, where do you think is the most ideal spot for it?
Well, I mean, ideally, you wouldn't build one in a residential area near hospitals, near schools. Just looking at the cost, just say the cost for transmission. These facilities use a ton of electricity. And so it's not like that they can be served with existing electric lines. So you're having to build all this new transmission, new interconnect, substations. So ideally, you would want them located close to power plants. Some of the locations that we're seeing across Kentucky, I mean, look at Paducah. They're $100 billion data center and power plant going to be built on a former uranium enrichment site.
Yeah.
That site literally can't be used for anything else. I mean, when you think of all of the environmental hazards and mitigation efforts that would have to go on a site where they used to enrich uranium. I mean, it can't be used for anything else. So that makes sense, right? When you look at the plant that they're talking about out in Hancock County, at the former Century Aluminum site, same thing. A former smelter that has all of the utility infrastructure already built. All of everything that a data center would need at a former industrial site where they used to, manufacture metals, in a community that probably needs economic development. You've got everything they need already there. That kind of makes sense. And because of, when Century left, that caused utility bills to go up. And so theoretically, this data center should help drive down costs out in that area, because you've got, that's the perfect example of what happens when you don't have adequate protections in place. So just kind of a small history lesson. When Century Aluminum located there, they had to build all this infrastructure to get power there. Just to have the power, they had to put steel in the ground. And so that caused, there's cost associated with that. And then when they left, that caused everybody's bills to go up. So having an end user like this should help drive down costs in that particular utility. So, I mean, places like that makes perfect sense. And they need to go, honestly, in communities where they're wanted. I think that's a big thing. We want to make sure
Does
that,
anybody want a data center?
That was going to be my follow-up.
Go ahead.
We talk about issues that sort of bring people together across party lines. It seems the data center conversation, at least to some degree, has done that. Big city, small city, rural, urban. I haven't talked to a lot of on-the-ground citizens who want this. I mean, how do you guys sort of navigate around that? Because you do have a lot of Republicans, including Robert Stivers, saying, yeah, we don't want this to hurt the fabric of the community, but at the same time they say we cannot lose to China, and that seems like something that they're not willing to sort of give on. So how do you find that middle here?
And that's, finding that middle is important. So if people have concerns about energy usage, we need to pass a piece of legislation, and House Bill 593 that passed the House would have taken care of all of their concerns around energy usage. It would have taken care of their concerns around water. On the utility side, it would have handled all of that. So if there are specific concerns around the industry itself, I feel like we can address that. Now, if the concerns are about what a data center means and for artificial intelligence into the future, that's a whole different conversation, right? Like, are people concerned? One of the arguments I've heard is they're tying these data centers with like flock cameras and surveillance. That's a whole different kind of conversation, right? We're focused on making sure that if a data center locates in Kentucky, we need to make sure that we've got appropriate policies in place to make sure that ratepayers are held harmless so that they're not taking on any risk that they don't need to take on, while also ensuring that the economic benefits, if they come in, are going to be there for those communities.
Are you looking at any cities? A lot of cities in Kentucky are already working on their own regulations. Louisville is in the throes right now of putting it together. Are you looking at any of those, Josh, to maybe put into the hands of the state? I even heard President Trump say just recently he also believes it needs to be down on a local issue making these decisions. Governor Andy Beshear has said the same.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the foundation of Kentucky, right? Like, we've got home rule counties, home rule cities. They've got the ability to do planning and zoning already. They've got the ability to decide what's can locate there, what the restrictions are. So as these cities and counties are passing ordinances or legislations tied around this, we're reviewing all of those, making sure that any kind of local control issues we've got, we're not running afoul of that principle.
And something that our producer just made note of, and want to point this out that, as far as we're seeing, that the U.S. is already outnumbering, at least from the data we're seeing, data center proposals compared to China. We are seeing some reporting based on, I think it was a couple posts on social media by in the other chamber, Senator Robbie Mills, who of course the Republican in leadership, talked about maybe indicating that maybe we roll back some of those tax exemptions that data centers have been offered. Reading between the lines here, it's sort of like, can we say that maybe a lot of these proposals have just come sort of in bulk here and you don't need to have those tax exemptions because they're here and they're ready to go to some degree?
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the most complicated parts of the data center conversation is we don't know how many projects are actually in the pipeline.
Yeah.
So like back the interim before last, I was the co-chair with Senator Amanda Mays Bledsoe on the Artificial Intelligence Task Force. And in one of our meetings, KU testified that they had 27 data center projects in the pipeline.
That made a lot of headlines.
So one of our
that meeting.
Yep. And so one of our issue is we don't know how many of those are actually legitimate, how many of those, how far along those projects are, because if that 27 numbers to be believed, then the demand for electricity is far going to outstrip the supply. But kind of what we've been told is that they're all in different varying stages. Some of them may just be kicking the tires. Some of them may be reported multiple times because they may be looking at 4 or 5 different counties trying to find the right place. And so that's part of the problem that we've got is because like right now there's no application fee. That's one of the things House Bill 593 had that we're looking at increasing. We had a $75,000 application fee. We're going to probably look at bumping that up so that you can kind of separate the wheat from the chaff. And we know how many of these projects are actually legitimate looking at Kentucky.
Josh, do you think this is an issue that makes or breaks politicians and their elections in the future? It's everywhere, it seems. It's touching every part of life. What's your opinion on that?
I've said this publicly multiple times. This is the biggest issue, national security issue of my lifetime. And I graduated I was in high school when 9/11 happened. What ends up happening with artificial intelligence and what that means for data centers, I think is going to set the course of this country for the next 200 years. And so I feel like it's really important that we get this right. It's really important that we have thoughtful restrictions and thoughtful guardrails in place to make sure that, we're protecting Kentucky's best interests.
And Representative,
but,
go ahead.
No, go ahead. I apologize.
No, I think you raise a good point because we've heard Senator Rand Paul, being one, even question whether maybe we build all these data centers and maybe in 20, 30 years from now, we realize maybe we jumped the gun a little bit. I mean, this happens all the time with projects in all different phases. Do we need this amount to, produce what we need as far as AI and other?
Does it become an albatross for these communities later?
Right.
And as you said, though,
Can I do these things?
You believe it sets it could be setting us up for the next 200 years.
Yeah, and so that's part of my concern as well. And that's why I go back to, by making these data centers prepay for all of the utility costs up front, and that means full cost allocation. Because it's one thing to say they're going to prepay for all of this, but the devil is always in the details. And that's why this issue is so complicated, because energy policy in our country, it's extremely complicated just with the different business models we have in the state of Kentucky. But making sure that they pay for all these issues up front, that way if the bubble does pop, or if chips become more efficient, or if we reach market saturation on data centers, that way, we don't have ratepayers kind of holding the bag on that. And so in my mind, that's one of the most paramount protections that we can put in place.
Yeah, interesting conversation. We'll definitely be revisiting it going into next year's session. Representative Josh Bray from there in Mount Vernon, south of Lexington. Thank you so much for taking a few minutes with us.
Yeah, thank you all.
And that's been the Powers That Be. Thank you all so much for watching. Take care.
Powers That Be, sponsored by Alex R. White, personal injury lawyers you can trust.